Okay, in this tutorial, we're going to import some assets. We're going to create a terrain. We're going to customize the terrain by adding mountains, possibly a lake or river, adding a beach with an ocean that surrounds the island. We're going to add some texture to the island, add some trees. We're going to add our tower that we created in the previous tutorial. We're going to add some light, such as from the sun. We're going to add a sky. We're going to add different light sources to the building, such as lamps or ceiling lights. We're then going to add a player that we can control and walk around our island. And that should conclude our tutorial. So let's get started. Basically what we want to do is we're going to go File, New Scene, and you want to create a new scene. Um, Now once you're in a new scene, you're not going to create a plane. What you're going to do is create a terrain. Okay, so you can go create terrain like that, or you can go up top to um, assets, and you can go down here to terrain. You can go assets, create. Oh, sorry, game object, and create terrain. So it's up to you. Basically, when you do create a terrain, what you will notice if you zoom back using the mouse wheel on your mouse, it's huge. And what we're going to do is making sure that you have selected terrain. On the right hand side, the inspector, we're going to go over here and you'll see terrain script, and you'll see these buttons, and we're going to go through all of these buttons in a second, but what I want you to do is go all the way to the last one, which is basically this settings icon right here. Click on that. If you scroll all the way down, you'll see terrain width, terrain length, and terrain height. Now, we're going to leave the terrain height, but what we will change is the terrain width and length. And we're going to change that to about 500 by 500. Now, these are in meters. So that is half a kilometer. So if you were to drop your character and walk your character from one side to the other, that would be half a kilometer. Okay. Now, when I hold down the right click and I move with WASD, you can see how slow I'm actually moving. It's because this terrain is a lot bigger than the plane we created in the first tutorial. So in this one, what you'll need to do is make sure when you hit the right click that you also hold down shift, and that way you can move a lot quicker. You won't be moving that much quicker, but as you will be able to tell that it is significantly quicker while holding down the shift key and moving forward. Okay, so let's get started. We've got a terrain, and basically what we want to do is know how to change the shape, the layout, etc. of this. Now, before we actually proceed with changing, what we want to do is just tick off some of these things. So we've created a terrain. What we want to do is import some assets. So to import some assets, what you can do is basically right click down here and go import package, and there's a few packages that we need, and what I want you guys to do is basically go through them one at a time. The first one we need is terrain assets. Just zoom into that. So that's the one there, terrain assets. So we'll import that, and we want all of them, so just click on the import button, and depending on the speed of the computer, this may take a little while depending on how many assets you are bringing in as well. And you'll see in your assets folder you now have standard assets folder, and your terrain assets have been imported, and we will check them out later on. So let's right click again and let's go import package, and the next one we're going to do is tree creator, because we're going to bring in some trees later on, so we'll bring that in. That'll take some time to load up. Now the reason why you don't import, well, you can, but most people will import assets later instead of doing it at the start, is because it just takes so long to import all of the assets that you want into Unity before you even start designing your game. So we're going to keep going. We're going to right click, import package. We're going to get the water basic. Now the school's computers, we do have the pro version, but just for this we don't need any of the pro assets, so we will go with the water basic. So import that. Let's import those effects. We're going to do it again, right click, import package. We're going to grab the skyboxes because we will want sky. So let's import all of them. Let's keep going, right click, import package. Just make sure we've got everything. Okay, last thing we're going to do is bring in character controller. Okay, so if we were to click on standard assets, you'll see we've got character controller, we've got skyboxes, terrain assets, tree creator, and water basic. You can actually click inside to see in the character controllers you have a third person character, and we'll check them out later, and a first person character. If we go back, you've got skyboxes, different types of skies that we're going to be bringing in. Terrain assets, you got different types of grass and textures and things like that, and trees, different types of trees that we can bring into our game as well. And last but not least, water, different type of water, and we'll be checking that out in a second. Okay, well, first things first, what we're going to do is click on our terrain, and we're going to have a look at some of these tools, and we'll go through one at a time. Okay, so we're going to click on the first tool, which is this one here. And as you can see, it tells us that it will raise and lower the terrain. If you do a normal left click, it will raise the terrain. If we hold down shift and do a left click, it will lower the terrain. Okay, so I'm going to basically click on the first one. You can see that the blue area is very small, so we're going to increase that. Make it even bigger. And what we're going to do is basically raise the terrain. So I'll just go around, just zoom out a bit. I might drop the opacity down just so it's not so huge straight away. And what we want to do is create like a mountainous region around, have a soft area in the middle, because that's where our center point tower is going to be. Now again, if you think it's too high, and there is a maximum limit to how high you can get something, so it actually does, if I can keep going, it will eventually max out. And there it is, that's the maximum height. And I'll just hold shift so we can bring that down. Okay. Now, after I've created a little bit of an area, what I want to do is I want to grab one of these rough brushes, maybe this one here, and with the rough brush and the opacity down, I'm going to go down top view, so I'm going to hit the Y, and I'm just zoom in a little bit. And what you want to do is basically just rough it up, and that will make it look, so I'm just holding down the left click and I'm just running around, and that will actually make it look more like a mountain because of the rough areas. We can zoom in and have a look around, and now we've got a bit of a valley going. It's not looking too bad. Just go over here to the next tab, and this is called paint height. Hold shift to sample target height, and I'll just show you what this does. It's very important. For example, let's pretend that I wanted an area where my center point tower was going to be, and I wanted that area to be higher than the rest of the area, but I also wanted it to be flat. Now if I was to use the raise terrain, something like that, or if I was going to use this one here and just raise the terrain, I could mess it up. So what this one does here, the second one, paint height, if I hold shift down, I can say I want this particular height right here, and I just click on it. And then I let go of shift, and that whole, wherever I go now, it will make that height, exactly that height. So if I wanted, say, this height here, I can hold shift, click on that area, and now that'll be the same height. Wherever I paint, it will become that height. And I'm just creating a nice little area for our center point tower to be on. Okay, that's good. So our center point tower will be here, and it'll be just surrounded by trees and stuff like that if you want. It's up to you. Okay, we're going to go down to paint texture, which is the fourth tool. We don't have any textures yet, so we're going to hit edit texture, and we're going to add a texture. We're going to click on select where it says none, texture 2D, and it's going to ask us what texture we want. Now this is going into our assets folder, and basically what we want to do is paint the mountains with a particular texture. Now I'm going to look for a rock. I'm just going to type in rock, and I'm going to grab the cliff texture. I'm just going to double click on that, and then I'm going to hit add. Automatically it makes the whole area that texture. What I'm now going to do is edit the textures and add another texture. I'm going to click select again, and this time I'm going to type in rock, but there was a different one. There was a one called grass and rock, and I'm just going to select that one. I'm going to double click on it and hit add. Now I've got two textures. I've got the initial one, which is painted my whole terrain with, and I've got this grass and rocky texture. And now what I'm going to do is basically just zoom into this area, and I'm going to leave most of it to look like a rock, but what I'm going to do is the areas closest to land, I'll actually make it this rocky texture, rocky and grassy texture. Okay, I'll just spin around, I'll just do this area. Okay, now another cool thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this, I'm not going to grab the circular brush, I'm going to grab this rough one, and basically just going to make that smaller, and I'm just going to click this texture, just might turn up the opacity here, put the brush size down. Just to change how the mountains look a little bit. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. There we go. Do the rest of it here. Oop. Remember, if you make a mistake, Control Z, and just go back to that one. Okay, so we're going to keep adding, we might just do one more texture. So I'll go add texture, edit textures, add texture. This time I'll look for grass, and we'll just get this grass that writes hill, and double click on that, hit add on that, select it, and I'll just use a nice brush and get a nice grassy texture going just along the inner parts of our island here. I just might make it a bit bigger. There we go. Excellent. Now, what I'm going to do is next is bring in some trees. So we're going to click over to the next tab, and it's telling us how to place trees. Hold down Shift to erase trees, hold down Control to erase the selected tree type. So basically we just left click to place trees. We need to bring in some trees first. So I'm going to go edit trees and add a tree. I'm going to then click on this button right here, and it's going to ask me what type of trees I want. Now the ones that we've brought in through our assets, basically we've got a big tree and we've got palm trees. Now obviously we can bring in more tree assets through the Unity web store. There's also a tree creator where you can create your own trees. We're just going to use the big tree for now, so I'll double click on that, and then I will click add. Now with the tree, what you will see underneath the tree are different types of settings for that tree. So brush size, obviously we can adjust the brush size. Tree density, so how many trees within the area. Color variation, so it might increase that. Tree height and variation, might even increase that a little bit. Tree width, might leave that. Variation, maybe get that up a little bit, so just so it looks a little bit more different. Okay, and now basically we're just going to paint on trees. There we go. Simple as that. sporadically. Might just put some around the mountains here. There we go. And fill up this area. Make it a little bit more dense down here. Perfect. Okay. Our island's not looking too bad at the moment. That definitely pushes it up quite a bit. Okay. So with the trees, what I am going to do is I want one side to be a beach. So I'm just going to have a look at my island from a couple of different angles. Okay. Okay. I might make this side the beach side right there. So what I'm going to do, I am going to have a path coming out and basically flatten this area right here. So first things first, I'm going to grab the first tool and I'm going to hold shift down and I'm going to basically flatten this because this is my beach area. And I'll just flatten it and make a little road for me. There we go. Now, the second thing I should do is go over to our trees, hold shift down and clear a path to my beach. So erase some of these trees that are here. There we go. Now, obviously my beach needs a better texture. So we'll go over to the paint icon and I'll go edit textures, add a new texture, and let's see if there's no sand. Maybe there's, let me see what else we can add. There's this one called Good Dirt. I mean, it's probably not the best thing, or yeah, we'll just use that for now. There's probably sand textures we can download from the asset store, but we'll just use that. We'll just move the brush size down and it's realistic enough. Okay. Excellent. So far it's looking pretty good. I think what we need to do is start adding some water. Now, I'm going to go over to our assets here and you're going to see a folder in your assets folder, standard assets, water basic, and we're going to use the daytime simple water. Basically, I'm just going to drag that on and let go. I'll just zoom out, and if we can see, the water is actually floating in mid-air. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on our water. We're going to go over to position here in the inspector, and we're going to make sure it's position 0, 0, 0. And from there, what we're going to do is scale the water. So we're going to get the scaling tool and we're going to click on our simple water and we're just going to make it bigger. Okay. Just from the middle, just keep stretching it out. And now I'm going to grab the moving tool and I'm just going to move it to the center like that. Okay. Now, if I click outside, as you can see, my water some of it is above the terrain. So what we need to do is actually lift our whole terrain up, and then the edges will sink into the water so it actually looks like an island. So first thing I'm going to do is go top down. So I'm going to hit the little Y there. I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to click on terrain, and I'm going to grab the raise terrain tool. Now I'm going to make my brush size huge, as big as it can get, and I'll click on this one here, and you can see there it is there, the blue icon. So I'm using this one here, which is, there's no fade, it's not a soft brush, it's a really hard brush. The brush size is all the way up, and opacity is set to, let's say, about 20. Okay, basically we're going to do this really quickly. We're going to click and hold, and we're going to basically just go like this all the way through, and we're going to basically raise the whole terrain up. Here we go. Okay, could do it again a little bit more. Okay, so that would have raised it above the water. So now I can just use my right click and WASD to move around. And now what I'm going to do is to fix this area up. I'm going to use the raise lower terrain tool, and I am going to hold shift down and actually make this look like a proper island. So I'm going to hold shift, and I'm just going to basically sink the terrain into the water. Okay, if it's not going into the water, what we can do is just lift the water. So I'm going to go to simple water, I'm going to click on the moving tool, and I'm just simply going to raise it. Not so much that it goes inside, but just on the outside. Okay, simple as that. Now next thing, I might go top down view again, and I'll click on terrain, click on the raise and lower terrain, and I'm just going to hold shift and carve myself a nice looking island. You can do it any shape you like. This is obviously an island, so try and make it as much of an island look and feel as you can. Okay. Now, there was a tool that I showed you guys before, and it was the leveler tool. So basically, it was the second tool over here, and you could hold shift, and what it would do is sample a height, and then you can actually paint that height to make everything level again. So I might just go top down view, just zoom out a bit, make it a bit bigger, and just smooth out this whole area, especially the beach area. There we go, much better. Let's have a nice smooth area for where we can have our beach. Okay, looking a little better. Okay. Just might raise the water and just have a look at it. So, yeah, that's probably good right there. Yeah. Okay, now you'll see some trees are in the water, etc. What we are going to do after I just scale the water out a little bit more is we're going to click on the terrain, we're going to click on trees, and we're going to hold shift down so we can delete the excess trees that should not be in the water. I'll just go top down again and have a look quickly around the island. That's good. Okay. So our island is ready. There is a couple of more things we can do, and we're just going to add a bit of grass to this area here on our terrain. So we're going to go over to this one here. It's called Paint Details, and we're going to go down to Edit Details, and we're going to add a grass texture, and we're going to click on this button right here, and we're going to look for a grass texture. And the one we want, it's either this one or that one. It's up to you which one you'd like to import. I'm just going to go with the first one. Double click on it, hit add, and now we're basically going to paint on grass. Okay, now this isn't a texture, this is actual grass blades that you will be able to walk through and actually see move while your character is in the game. Now be careful with this, because this grass texture, although looks fantastic, chews up a lot of memory and data, and your CPU and RAM and your computer may not actually be able to handle the processing power required. So be very, very careful how much you put. I'm just going to throw it in sporadically there. Okay. Sometimes you won't see it until you've actually zoomed in. Okay. So, next thing we're going to do, we are actually going to place. So if I go down to our prefabs folder where we had our tower, and this is something we created in the last tutorial, and I'm just going to drag that tower into my game. I'm going to use the moving tool to make sure it is. Actually, what I could do is just go to the inspector and put 0, 0, 0 to make sure it's on the side of my island. There it is. And I'm just going to move that across, make sure it's visible. And it's actually really, really small. I must have not taken scaling into consideration when making my center point tower. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the scaling tool, and we're just going to make it bigger, a lot bigger. And I'll grab my moving tool and we'll make it sit just there. That actually looks really, really good. We've placed that quite well. Okay, so now that our tower is in it, I guess the last thing that we need to do, and I'll just double check the list and make sure we've done everything. Imported assets, created terrain, we've customized the terrain, we've added textures, added trees, we've just put our center point tower in. We will add light and a skybox and then some light source to the building. We will then finish up by adding a player and then control the player. Okay, so We have an island, we have the water surrounding the island. We don't have a sky as of yet. So if we were to look up, it's basically blank. And if I was to check out how it looks in the game, you'll see it's just blue. So we need to add some atmosphere. To do that, we're going to go up here. We're going to click on Edit. We're going to go down to Render Settings. Now in Render Settings, one thing we will see is Skybox material. And at the moment there's none. I'm going to click on that button right there. And we're going to look for a skybox, and I'm going to pick any. I'm going to go with Sunny One Skybox. So you could, if you can't see it, you could just type in Sunny, and that's the one I'm going to go with, Sunny One. Double click on that, and you will notice we now have a sky. Excellent. And if I go into my game, you'll see our island. Now, the next thing we want to do is actually add some light. Now, you'll also notice in the render settings there's fog, and we'll get to that in a little bit. What I might even do is add it to the list, just so we don't forget it. So we're going to add a player very soon so we can walk around the island. What we want to do first, though, is add some light. So we're going to go to Create, and we're going to add Directional Light. Okay, now with this in the game, you can actually see it's on the left, the hierarchy. Just like anything else in the game, we can move this. Now it doesn't necessarily matter where you put this, but what will matter is the direction in which you are facing. So if I rotate it around, you can see the shadows are changing on my island. So this is sort of like the sun, and you can decide where you want to place the sun. Now I'm going to move it up, and basically let it shine straight down and cast shadows, just like that. Now with the directional light, we can go over here to the right hand side to our inspector, and we can see shadow type, and we can go for hard shadows. Soft shadows is normally what I do. It depends what version of Unity you have, if you have the free version or not. And then you can basically decide on the strength and softness of the shadows, etc. I'm just going to leave the default settings there. I'm now going to zoom into my building, so I'm going to double click on the center point tower, and that'll zoom in a bit. I'll zoom in a little bit more. There we go. And now what I'm going to do is add a bit of light. So I'm going to go Create, and I'm going to add point light. And let me just see where this is at the moment. Yep, nowhere where I want it actually. Okay. Now I want it in front of my elevator. Just zoom into that. Okay. Just going to put it just about here. down a little bit. And I'll just center it. Perfect. Now I can change the color of the light. I can increase its intensity, just like that. So I'm going to make it a fairly bright light so people know. I'm also going to change the color. Let me see. Something where people can know that it's an elevator, maybe a blue light. And I might cast some soft shadows as well on things that are around. Okay, so now I'll just zoom out. So we've got a light in the front. All right, now it's time to bring in our player. So we've done the lights, we've added a skybox, we've put some light source to the building, and you can add more lights if you like on the outer perimeters of the building. We're going to add a player and we're going to control that player. So if we go over to our standard assets and we go to character controller, you have a third person and a first person. Now basically I'm just going to drop the first person into our game. I need to make sure that if I zoom right into him, so if I double click on him, that he's not in the ground. Okay, he must be above the ground, otherwise as soon as you hit play, he's going to start falling into space. So we're going to click on the moving tool, we're going to basically drag him above the ground. Okay, so make sure he is floating above the ground. Okay, if he is halfway into the ground, he will not be able to move. So it's probably better if you have him sitting just above the ground. Now what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to make him start where the beach is. So I'm just going to drag him out all the way up there. Bring him back in a bit. Go a bit higher. Okay. Now, as soon as you have placed your first person character controller into the game, we are actually ready to play. So without further ado, we're going to hit the play button for the first time. And let's see what happens. And here's my control. Now I'm controlling my player's view with the mouse, and I hit WASD to move around. WASD moves around. Now I don't want to fall off into the water just yet, so let's just keep walking through. Let's have a look at some of these things that we've put in place. We've got some trees. If you hit the space bar, you can actually jump. Here's some of the grass I was telling you about. And you can see the wind is actually blowing the grass, which is a fantastic effect. And there is my center point tower. Now obviously this elevator is non-functioning, but if we have a look around, you can actually see it's quite a stunning building, I have to say. And there is our island. Really, really cool. We're in the shadow now. I'm going to hit the play button. And it's really important that you know to always hit the play button to get out of the game. And I'll tell you why. If we hit the play button, and if I make a change, if I go to scene while the play button is on, and let's say for example I move the center point tower this way and I decide to make it much bigger, and then I go back into my game and there it is, much bigger. I've also moved it, and I'm playing. As soon as I hit the play button, any changes I made are not saved. Now, there is a reason for that, and one of the reasons is if you wanted to test something without doing it permanently, that's the best way to do it. Play your game, you're testing things out, okay, you're playing your game, maybe you want to see if you can, test something out in your level, so you go back to your scene, you scroll towards your character, maybe drop some ammo for your character, jump back into the game, pick up the ammo, and away you go again. So it just depends. It's for testing purposes mainly, but just remember, while the play button is on, anything you do to your game will not be saved. Okay, now what we're going to do is basically go over here on the left hand side. We're going to right click, we're going to delete our first person character, and we're going to go down to third person, and we're going to drag that one onto our game. Let's just make sure this character is above ground, so let's move him up, and as soon as he is above ground, hit play, and there he is. And it's a pretty simple character indeed. He doesn't use the mouse at all. WASD, and he can jump. There he is. So it depends which type of character you want, third person or first person. Don't have both of them in there. The computer, if you open them up, what you might notice is that both of them have some sort of graphics. They also have a camera attached to them. Now, if you have too many, you can have more than one camera, but what you can't have is more than one microphone in your game, and most cameras will have a microphone attached, an audio listener. So what you would want to do is, I'll just delete these, is bring in your, let's say, first person character. There he is. Let me just put him onto the island, so far away. Okay, so there he is, and you'll see I've got a main camera, an audio listener. You may even notice if I hit play that I've got an error message down below here, and the error message is saying that there are 2 audio listeners in the scene, and that's because I still have my main camera. So this is the camera you start off with at the very start of the game. There it is there. And this camera allows you to check out things in the scene. We went through this briefly in the first tutorial. So basically what you would want to do is either delete the main camera, or you can just go over here in the inspector and untick it. And basically that will disable the main camera, and your actual main camera will now be the first person character. So I hope you like this tutorial. Other things you can do is go on to Google 3D Warehouse and import assets. We will look at programming in a later tutorial where we can grab some assets that have been made by other characters, other people, and we can use those characters that they've created with the animations and link them to buttons via programming. So that'll be the next tutorial. Thank you for listening.